All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Supply Chaney podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Chaney, and this is the podcast where we talk to the experts in supply chain and we try to dig in a little bit into their personal stories, their professional stories, and then talk a little bit about the practitioner side as well. We want to try to cover the entire end to end of the supply chain people's story. And today we have James Malley, who is with Paccurate. I'm going to dig into kind of like when he first learned he wanted to be a professional boxer one day, and also a little bit about what it's like to be a founder and to build a kind of a tech supply chain company in today's age. And so, with that being said, James, could you take a couple minutes and introduce everyone to you in a little more detail?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's always fun to talk to you. I'm CEO and co-founder at Paccurate. I've been focused on cartonization and packing optimization for over a decade at this point, before our company had the name Paccurate. But been in shipping execution software since 2009. So I would say the bulk of my professional career has been in parcel execution specifically.
Okay. Well, one of the things we like to try to do here is pull out the family photo albums and the old VCR and kind of just go back to the early days. And so kind of tell us a little about, where you grew up and what that was like around the James table there.
Sure. Uh, Actually, my co-founder and I kind of grew up together. I've known
Okay.
him. We've been friends since middle school, which makes communication shorthand very easy. And I actually grew up um, talking about parcel shipping as a kid because my dad
Hmm.
was in the space when I was growing up, and he was, you know, started some parcel shipping software companies. And so as a kid, I was like, man, that is the most boring thing I could possibly imagine. I'm not going to do that. And it was very much like, whatever, dad, I'm going to go into the arts. And so went to college for theater. Actually, I'm a theater kid. I don't like to talk about that, but in this space, but it's true. And I minored in computer science just in case the acting thing didn't pan out. And I think I auditioned for like one thing after college, and I was like, you know what? That's not. I don't. I have to go back to my roots. I like technology, and I like building things that last. I think that's one of the things about theater is like very ephemeral. And I loved it and don't regret doing it. There's something about technology where you're like constantly iterating and it persists. I think that's one of the reasons at a fairly young age I came back into the fold, so to speak.
It's really, really interesting that you're a co-founder from middle school. So, like in those early days, did you ever think we will still exist in each other's lives many years from now in such an intimate sort of way?
No, I mean, certainly, he's always been like very, he's an engineer, kind of strong in math and science. And so we were like, it was pretty clear early we were on like different trajectories. So that alone, we didn't, certainly didn't foresee building something together, over the long term. But, it wasn't long after college that we reconnected, and he had been, spending time in ad tech and science in the Boston area, and we were like, let's build some stuff. And so we built, a shipping system. We had actually the first project we tried to build together was a really ill-conceived social media website that was like it was fun to build, but it was like way too complicated. Basically, the idea was filmmaker would make a video, upload it, and then the audience would vote on what they wanted to happen next in the form of a donation to a charity. So it was like a really complicated, I think after we built it and it was over-engineered madness, um, we just found people were like, I'd just rather donate to charities instead of, have this convoluted gamification. But it really, it was really formative. The kind of difference between playing at kind of being business people versus actually doing it is like a good lesson to go through. And it also taught us a lot about, building and validating a product. So Yeah, and we've been working together ever since.
That idea of having practice businesses and playing business, like you mentioned, I can kind of that resonates really strongly with me as well as being having worked for companies for many years, but all that time always having side projects and side hustles and things I think are going to be the next $1 million idea. And I feel like all those were great practice runs at finally when arriving at that one thing, at supply chain now, right? Is like, okay, great. If I didn't have all those practice runs, I wouldn't have been able to be as successful, we want to say, quote unquote, at what I'm trying to do today. Tell me a little bit more about kind of like the lessons learned. Like, is there any one particular thing that you've kind of brought to Paccurate today from, from those early attempts or that first one, I guess?
Oh man. Well, I think it's, I haven't gone to business school, but I have heard from people that have done it that trying and failing is a much more efficient way to get educated on the fundamentals. So, and understanding that a real durable business, like having a slick product is not enough. It's you have to have a much more holistic vision for how things will actually work. And I think the only way that I personally have been able to like internalize that is by going through it a few times, missing some really important aspects, and then making sure we don't miss them on the next time around. Um, and so even, we started working on Paccurate as like a hobby like a decade ago. We were kind of like guns for hire, building apps and integrations, and we had a web-based shipping system, kind of like ShipStation, but with no funding. So you can imagine how that went. But we had clients start saying, "Can you guys go find some cubing logic because we're getting absolutely clobbered on dimensional weight fees." And we didn't really find anything we thought was like modern and good and fast and reliable. And so we were on a whim almost. My co-founder, because he's so good with math, he was like, "Let me try." Actually, I built the prototype that barely worked just to make him angry enough to go do it himself well. That is my claim to the product fame at this point. Um, and then yeah, it was a hobby, and SMBs would come in, kind of sign up, and then it wasn't really until the pandemic hit that we had all these like big brands signing up all of a sudden. We are like, oh, okay, I guess this is our business now. How do we formalize it and scale it?
You bring up theater. I also was when I play theater all 4 years of high school, and I didn't know it at the time. But in this day and age of being content being king right now, I've realized that that theater experience actually has come in so handy that I did not ever plan for. I'm kind of curious what your take is from if you kind of put that arts hat back on and you kind of
Mhm.
think about the business that you're in today. That content and advertising and marketing and social media, all that is so kind of important, I think. But I'm curious what James, the theater, actor, kind of thinks about it.
Yeah, well, not to get, you know, too woo woo about it, but I think it always fascinated me as a kid because I like the idea of using story to convey some kind of true thing that was relatable but difficult to explain clinically, if that makes sense. Like you have to like tell a story to convey an idea. And so I think that that is especially true for business, where hopefully you're not telling stories that are false. You always want to tell stories that are true, but if you get really good at storytelling, it just makes it faster, so you can get to a connection with somebody you want to connect with. And that goes for customers, partners, people that we've hired. So I think narrative is like a big piece of what we do internally. And we say it's not our phrase, but the story is the strategy. We say that all the time.
Makes a lot of sense. There was something you were saying there that I wanted to capitalize on a little bit more, which is, well, one, you got to trying to tell the truth in your storytelling. Like there's some cases, in the business world where that hasn't always been the case. So thanks for calling that out, I suppose. Also, I think there's actually like a whole book that you can buy that's like, here's 20 short stories and here's how you can weave use these as anecdotes for your own business. And it's like trying to help founders and companies find what their story is. I'm kind of curious, what is the Paccurate story then now? Like, what's the story you all tell to help kind of move people along the path of knowing and understanding and buying in?
Yeah, I think internally and externally, it's the same story, but two different sides of it. So internally, I think people come to work here because there's a lot of places they could work, especially, like very talented engineers. But I think the story that Pat, my co-founder, and I believe in is that working on this problem set in particular gets us to leave a pretty meaningful professional legacy. And so, not to diminish any other, kind of software vertical, but we can measure the tons of CO2 saved. And we can quantify that impact so that when people go on, if people go on to their next role, they can at least look back and be proud of that thing that was not simply, I helped a company get bigger. It's like, I actually had this specific impact that we're able to see and measure. And so the flip side of that for customers, sometimes we talk a little bit about that, but we find, especially much more in the EU, where that message resonates as well. But the flip side of that is this is a overlooked problem set in supply chain. It still is. And I think part of it is that a lot of people think it's already solved. But if you can make your life a little bit better by having one less fire to put out, while also having all these follow-on effects. And I mean, that's less me selling Paccurate. That's more me selling the problem, right?
I'm curious that you just touched on sustainability and that the ability to say, hey, we're doing something about this to help make work more meaningful. I think that in sort of the younger generations, the generations that are out there entering the workforce now, that having a measurable sort of impact on life and the world is almost like as important as what the salary is and whatnot. I'm kind of curious, like from y'all's perspective, seeing as how you kind of probably leverage that a little bit in your recruiting motion. Like how are you seeing that? Does that move the needle for folks by being able to say, like, here's the difference you can make?
Definitely. I think definitely. I mean, I would say right away when you're talking to somebody that is considering joining the team, you can tell, like, if they, like us, are kind of like hungry for impact. I'm not saying you have to have that to work at Paccurate, but you can almost tell right away where, they're like zero. They want to know the numbers. Like for every, I think right now, just in saved corrugate alone, per employee at Paccurate, we save 250 tons of CO2 per year. And the pitch is, if that's something you care about, come here, help us grow that number, and that'll be your legacy with us. And it has the benefit of being true. So it's definitely been resonating.
Let's unpack that corrugate savings a little bit more, pun intended.
So to speak.
One of the things that I think about, as a logistician and caring about supply chain and caring about the world is, oh my gosh, the amount of boxes in corrugate that we get shipped. I mean, you take this household and that one and that one and that one times millions of them every day. And I'm just like, what the heck is going on? Like, how is this sustainable? Can we be more sustainable about this? What's the best practices out there? And I mean, it's just a ton of waste, and hopefully it's getting recycled in some sort of way. But like, what are some of the statistics? I guess I know you're going to be on top of them, and kind of like,
Set me up.
what's next? Like, is there something beyond cardboard boxes out there? And not, I guess that might be not the best conversation for you all. I was like, what does the world look like in e-com and fulfillment outside of boxes? Is there a future there?
Yeah. Um, as with energy production conversations, it's never as black and white as what most people are like advocating for, which is not a satisfying, you know, fine print for me to give, but I think important to like keep in mind there are trade-offs. Um, Corrugate is still the best thing for moving stuff. It is one of the things that human beings are really talented at recycling and turning into other stuff. Um, and but that doesn't mean that they're free from a carbon emission standpoint. And so I think that's where like sometimes we joke like we're kind of like the least sexy of the three R's. We're the reduce. We're not, providing packaging materials made out of like stardust, whatever the, kind of next gen material science is. We're just like, we're just making sure you only use exactly what you need and nothing more. I mean, stats, every 1 ton of corrugate produced creates 3 tons of CO2 equivalent. Um, and so, it's not carbon neutral, but it's still the best thing we've got. What's encouraging and exciting is some of those, it's kind of making fun by saying stardust, but some of the alternative materials coming out are starting to be viable for mass production at scale. And so, as an example, we have no affiliation with this company Sway that makes seaweed based packaging material. So I have no dog in the fight, but I've been watching them very closely because from what I can tell, they've started to figure out how to produce the materials and make it market ready on existing machinery, existing infrastructure, and that is always like the big hurdle. So I think a long way of saying corrugate is the way it is today, but we're probably not as far away as it feels from even more, ecologically beneficial stuff.
Yeah. I was just at a conference this past week, and we had coffee cups that were made out of some bamboo. I mean, I felt like I was drinking out of a pot that you had put a plant in. But apparently, like, and I think it said you have 40 minutes to drink this drink before the liquids start like eating through the thing, sort of thing.
That's the
Um,
caveat.
yeah.
Don't dilly dally.
Yes.
Well, the other complication is that we've in this country and in a lot of others have not done a very good job making exactly clear how to dispose of some of these new materials. So like compostable materials, great. I would place any bet that most people in this country don't know that there's some stuff that you can compost yourself and some stuff that says compostable but requires commercial composting, which requires its like own separate bin and process and all this stuff. And this issue is kind of coming to a head because there's a lot of US states working on EPR legislation to tell companies what materials they can use and can't use. But all the US states have different infrastructure. So there's like very little consistency state to state. So it's becoming like a real issue for manufacturers of this stuff to figure out how they're going to comply. But they're starting to have the conversation. I think that's what matters.
Speaking of compliance and the government and whatnot, I think that there was some kind of discussion in the past about requiring a certain amount of intelligence or like not packing so much air, and that this was like going to be in some sort of legislation. Can you give a quick update on that? Where are we at on that front?
Sure. So there's legislation in the EU called PPWR, and among other things, like specifying how much plastic you're able to use and various controls on the materials. It says for e-commerce and other B2C shipments, each box has to be at least 50% full. And so, as you might imagine, we're having a lot of conversations with people in the EU that it doesn't go into full force and effect until 2030, but the folks that are planning new facilities now are like, okay, how am I going to possibly comply with this? Like, this facility is going to be built now. It has to be ready for 2030. So those are the kinds of conversations we're having there. And it ends up being a mix of software like ours that, attempts to give control over pack out to them, with some hardware automation as well. So there's that. That's overseas. We're protected by an ocean from those regulations, except for the fact that some of the EPR projects that I mentioned in the U.S. states are taking some inspiration, I would say, from PPWR. And so I would expect within the next 5 years, we start having, empty space laws in the United States.
I'll keep in touch with you on that one. Then we'll keep on the front of it. I'm curious how you just talked a little bit you touched on the concept of hardware. So as we talk about automation or robotics in warehouses, more and more you've got where services like you all are going to need to be interfacing with hardware folks. And I've seen a number of partnership sort of announcements with you all and folks that are doing these kind of like right size packaging solutions. I'm kind of curious just from like the founder's perspective, what it's been like, for a go-to-market strategy about partnering with companies and kind of how you all see that, how you all approach that motion.
Yeah. I think when we started, we knew we needed partnerships, especially because our tech usually integrates with a WMS. So we wanted to integrate and align ourselves in the market with kind of forward-thinking WMSs that understood that what we were doing was different and maybe not too much, not a conflict with what they had built themselves. But a lot of partnerships early on, especially, we just really didn't know what was important. And so it would turn into, let's do a joint blog post and then, slap each other on the back and and that's it. I think as the company has matured and I've gotten more gray in my beard, it's just become more clear that aligning with sales is really the most important thing. So I think what we've been able to do with certain partners is prove that if they bring us in early in a sale, we can help them create more value in the business case and potentially sell faster and make the customer, go live faster. Sure, that has to do with our technology being complementary and all these things, but I think packaging just touches so many different things in the warehouse. It can make AMR, picking robotics have a much better return because you're able to put more work on the robots. I'm not an AMR vendor, but if I work with an AMR vendor to be a part of a more holistic business case, it can be really compelling. So that's an example of that. So I think the more we can help people's solution, create bigger ROIs, that's where the real partnerships have taken off.
It was interesting to hear you talk about partnering with WMSs and thinking about how you can be complementary to them without competing with sort of maybe the packing algorithm that they've already built. I think there's this concept in these days in kind of the world of SaaS that we live in, of these point solutions that do a really, really good job of doing what they do really, really well. And you've got the big kind of like bigger legacy system that someone's got in there. And you need to kind of go in and be like, look, I know you do X, but we do X 10 times better, and you should add us into your tech stack because we're so much better. Can you kind of talk about what those conversations are like when you're talking to a player that they do have an algorithm of some sort, but you're just better at it because it's what you do?
Yeah, I think it was especially early days, a harder conversation because we're effectively like, when it was just Pat and I, we're just a couple of kids coming, who are these kids? And they're like, we effectively just had a better mousetrap. We're we're optimizing for something completely different than they were. Most WMSs, regardless of how sophisticated their algorithms are just trying to find the small box, whereas we are optimizing directly for cost. So we have like carrier contracts, we have like labor rates, material cost, like all these things baked in. And that was like our spiel. That was like our differentiator. We will find weird ways of optimizing for your exact costs and save more money. And that was fine. But I think we would only get pulled in when the use case was so complicated that the WMS didn't even want to charge professional services to try to figure it out. They were like, can you just handle this? I think it wasn't until we really built out a broader platform of tools that we became like, oh, they're like, oh, this is actually like a whole separate collection of concerns and solutions that we're never going to build. So let's, for folks that are serious about packaging, it actually behooves us to not be the one kind of driving that use case. Let's let Paccurate do it, and we'll do the rest of the things that we're really good at.
Could we talk just a moment about who your ICP is? We've been talking about Paccurate. We've been talking about what y'all do, but what we haven't really done justice to, I think, is I'm just assumed that everyone knows who Paccurate is. So let's back up for 1 second and let you do like the quick pitch of just what the heck Paccurate is, and then kind of like who your ideal customer is, and then we'll take it forward a couple more steps.
Yeah. Well, since we've been talking about narrative and story, I think the easiest way to understand what we do is to just tell that in terms of how the technology's developed. So, like I said, when we started, we just had this point solution. It was an API. You plugged it in. It told you what boxes or mailers to use for any given shipment. And it's great. It's fast. You can do 10,000 requests per second, and high throughput environment kind of thing. But over time, I would say since 2021, we've really been more focused on the platform that is built on top of it, which has a few different responsibilities. One piece is called Pack Simulate. This thing will tell you what boxes or automation you should buy. It takes your data and runs what if scenarios and virtually packs things out until it gets to an answer. And it's like, if you want, very involved with surfacing data and statistics. There's a monitoring piece that we call Pack Health. So you can kind of identify when things are going sideways and you don't know why, so you can get into it and investigate. On that point, a weird number of customers come in that are having cartonization emergencies. And often the first statement when we get on the phone is, my CFO just called, angry, and I had no idea why. And so that's why we built the monitoring piece, is to not get any more angry CFO phone calls. And then the last piece, which is actually the piece that is kind of the easiest to understand, but also the thing that seems to be resonating the most, we call it Pack Manage. All it does is let operators add and adjust rules for how things should be packed. And it's kind of got an SOP management piece. And definitely finding this is the thing that, as a founder, I always look for the kind of product market fit of somebody having like the surprise jaw drop moment. And I'm like, but don't you know that we're optimizing with all this complex math this is made? And they're like, no. I just don't want to have to file an IT ticket and wait 6 months. I just want to press a button and go. So anyway, those are all the pieces of what we call it the packing control system. And the cartonization is still the core piece, the piece that integrates and tells you how to pack.
And then, so from that, who is your ideal customer? Is it 3PLs? Is it retailers that own their own freight? Like what size volumes? People that are doing 5 boxes, packages a day? Probably not in your ICP, I suppose.
Yeah. I would say you have to be doing probably 10,000 shipments a year for the API to make sense. If you want the whole platform, if you have people that are doing data projects and analysis, you're probably at that point, the whole platform is a good fit, and you're probably doing at least 200,000 shipments a year. But it's really anybody that does pick and pack. Interestingly, the smaller you are, the lower volume you are, the bigger impact on transportation savings. Because if you're a top 100, 500 shipper, you have a lot more leverage in your contract negotiations. So, trying to manipulate your transportation spend with packaging, it goes a lot further if you're smaller. We don't do a lot of work with CPG companies because those tend to be caseload. It's really those folks that are picking out of the shelves and putting into a box.
That makes a lot of sense. How about the journey from kind of what value story you were selling earlier, probably along the lines of you can optimize your packaging and reduce, kind of your carbon footprint and your corrugate spend. Is it still that people are coming to you for optimization solutions, or has that story sort of changed over the years?
I would say we don't lead with it like we did when it was just Pat and I. Pat and I were so excited about how it worked that we couldn't help but lead with like, look at how it has very much become a subplot. Like the main story is about control.
Okay.
Because pack out, I don't think we've ever met with a shipper, a head of operations who actually knew what was happening at the pack station. So, for example, we would ask, okay, what do you do with these products? They almost always have a different answer than what is actually happening in their warehouse.
Yeah.
It's not their fault. There's just a ton going on, and there's no visibility into it from the executive level. So now we always ask, you have to bring a packer if you want to talk to us because we need to find out what's actually going on.
Yeah.
So I would say the giving them visibility and control, and the idea that this will be a thing they don't have to worry about anymore, that it is something that'll be easy to manage or not think about. That is what the story is. That's what the narrative is, and what we aim to deliver first. And then the optimization piece, the dollars and cents, the savings on labor, transportation, materials, that's how they justify it. Because I think if anything, and I've noticed this about myself too, we tend to think that like B2B purchases are like super objective and always data driven, but it's like very much emotional. Like as a business owner myself, I have to like imagine how my life is going to be better if I, pull the trigger on signing up for a service. And so I think we've leaned into that quite a bit, and just highlighting how life can be like a little bit better. And they, our target market, they have hard jobs. Not that there are many easy jobs in supply chain, but like they're always putting out fires. They're always being asked to do things that are really difficult to do. So we found that that's resonated quite a bit.
I like it. I like it. That concept that there is still storytelling and there is still emotional selling, even in the world of B2B and in supply
For
chain,
sure.
where typically it's math and science, but there's some emotion and art in there.
Yeah, it's like why you buy versus how you justify it. That's how I think about it.
I like it. I'm gonna note that one down. So I know that there was a big piece of sort of an announcement made not too long ago that you all recently crossed the 1 billion packs processed threshold. I know that was just not too long ago. I'm curious, like kind of what new stories y'all are out with. What's going on? Kind of I guess with y'all's press release engine going on these days. Any case studies or whatnot out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think like we talked about before, we very much are embracing partnerships. And so when a partner releases a case study, and we're involved, it's like we get super excited about it. And so one of the more recent ones was Cardex, their auto store division, did a really beautiful video case study on their Sonopar deployment. And we got like the shout out in the video, and we were super excited. And so that's definitely worth watching because it's like a really interesting project outside of Paccurate too. But yeah, I think a lot of the automation projects going on right now are really exciting. And we end up being kind of a small but necessary piece of like a really big high stakes project. And so as we continue to mature, and I think have matured, understanding what role we play in those deployments has become really important. So to see it like come out in a video with especially the customer talking about it in a positive way is like really satisfying.
I'm putting myself in you and Pat's shoes a little bit, and I can see if I was thinking about like from the Pat perspective, he's like, man, the science and the math behind this is so awesome. Like this is so amazing. And then I put myself in your shoes and I'm thinking the storytelling piece of this and the optics of this is amazing. And it just makes for a good story. So
Yeah.
maybe to kind of start wrapping things up here, I'm curious what your take is on as a founder and trying to tell a story and build this thing. I've been able to watch you all for a minute, and this idea of being a boxer and boxing and all this sort of stuff, it's such a fun way to have a little bit of fun, and that's what I'm trying to do with supply chain is make it kind of relatable and accessible and fun. And so I'm kind of curious, can you tell me the story behind when the light bulb moment happened that you all were going to lean into this boxing analogy and whatnot there at Paccurate?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I think there's a whole generation of supply chain technology that it takes itself a little bit less seriously and has found a way to do that while still serving a mission critical operation. And I like to think that, we're one of those that it doesn't really, we don't think it's authentic to be like really serious and unsmiling all the time. So it's gotta be fun. Otherwise, I mean, this is especially with a startup where you got to work hard and you got to work long hours. Like if it's not at least a little bit fun,
Yeah.
that's a lot of your life that you're spending taking yourself too seriously. So that's as long as your customers know that you are taking their business seriously, their data seriously, especially. I think it gives companies like Paccurate permission to be a little bit more playful.
I like it. That resonates so strongly with me. So I appreciate you put it into good words. Thank you. That generation of sort of service providers and companies out there that are able to kind of step away from the suits and ties and have a little bit of fun while they're in their day job.
Yeah.
So James, thanks for hopping on and spending some time with us. I enjoyed hearing this story. Was there anything, any stones that we didn't turn over here during this conversation that you want to make sure to leave the audience with before we peace out?
I don't think so. I guess, would love to talk to you if you're a shipper and you're curious about. We do like free simulations, and so people can see how mutable their costs are with packaging tweaks. But in general, the kinds of changes that the parcel carriers are making lately mean there's almost definitely some money on the table. Maybe you're not ready for Paccurate. You could still affect your costs and your margins by focusing on packaging improvements. So that's all I would say. Things like the new rounding rules from FedEx and UPS, the new cubic surcharge, like it's coming like one thing after another, and they all kind of add up to packaging being critical this year. So
Awesome. Well, thanks for spending a little bit of time with us.
thanks, Nathan. This was great.